Hey friends! This week we've done a lot with organizing data into a graph. I think that right now we're doing pretty well with that, so we're not going to practice that today. Because we've gotten so good at that, I picked a graph for us to work with that has already been made. It already has the data sorted and organized into the graph. And this is the graph that we're going to work on today. Our job, what we're working on today, is interpreting data. That means thinking about data. We're going to ask questions and we're going to answer questions about data so that we can get more information from it. This particular graph has a title. Now, not all graphs will have a title, but we got lucky with this one, it does. The title can tell you a lot about the data. Just by looking at the title, you know this graph is going to be all about favorite pet. Okay? Now, that means that all the data is going to be an animal. It's going to be a pet. Okay? Now, over here, it tells us pets. That's where the data we're going to show. There are different types, the different pieces of data. We have hamster. That's a kind of pet. We have a dog. That's a kind of pet. And we have a cat. That's a kind of pet. Now, down here, this says number of children. That means how many children chose each of these things here as their favorite pet. Okay? So, if you look here at the hamster section right here, you can tell that, go to the end of the hamster line and go down, and that tells us the number of children. You don't even have to count. You just go to the end of the hamster line and down to where it says number of children. How many children chose a hamster? 5. Yes. Okay. We're going to do the same thing with the dog line. See how those squares colored in? All these squares colored in make a line. Go to the end of the line and down. What number is that? That's the number of children. What number is it? How many children have a dog as their favorite pet? 8. Good. Now, look here. Look at this right here. Where a cat is, we're going to look at those squares at the end of those squares put together at the end of that line. How many children had a cat as their favorite pet? 6. Look at that. Look at all that information that we could learn just by looking at the graph. Pretty cool, huh? Now I'm going to erase these because now that we've looked at the graph and the different data points and the different choices, we're going to go down and we're going to read and answer these questions down here. Number 1. Oh, I should mention, if you need help reading these, that's fine. In Seesaw, your activities, I will read them for you, the questions. But if you want to read them yourself, you surely can. You surely can try to read them yourself. If you have trouble with it, you can always play the recording. But if you get to a point where you don't have a recording to listen to and there's nobody around to ask you to read it for you, you can actually use the graph to help you read the question. Okay? Because the graph here, look, here are the data points. Remember, hamster, dog, cat. That means this says hamster, this says dog, and this says cat. Okay? Well, if I go to question number 1, look at question number 1. It says, how many, I remember that from when we were doing story problems, how many. This word right here, I don't know but I see it here. Do you remember what it said in the graph? These numbers down here told us the number of children. Yes. How many children? Good. I'm going to erase this. How many children chose? Then we have this word right here. That word also can be found in the graph. You see it? Yep, right there. That word is the same as that word. What's the picture show us? It's a cat, right? So how many children chose cats? And you know what, even if that picture weren't there, we could still match up the word and know that this column right here, that row is what we're looking at right there, okay? How many children chose cats? We're going to go to the end of the row, remember? Right here. How many children chose cats? What does it say? Yep, 6. Good job. Okay, I'm going to erase this and we're going to go on to the next one. Okay, how many, excuse me, how many children chose this word right here? Look for it up in the graph. See it there? All right. How many? You go to the end of the line. How many children chose hamsters? 5. Good job. Are you getting the idea how to use the graph to answer? You getting the idea? All right, let's see. Let's keep going. How many children like, what's that word? Right, it's right there. Go to the end of the line. Down. How many children like dogs? 8. Good. Now, it seems like I think we've answered all the questions about how many, because now the next part doesn't say how many, does it? It says, which pet did this word right here is really important. That word, we've talked about that before. I'm going to write it over here, most. Most means biggest, the biggest number. And it says, which pet did most children choose? You can look right there in the graph, whichever one has the longest or the biggest line would be this one right here. That is the one that has the most. Now, which is it? Let's look down here. What's that? Dog. Yep. So I'm going to write the word dog on this line. And if I'm not sure how to spell it, I can always look up in the graph. Dog. Okay, good job. We're going to just keep going. You're doing a great job of working with me. Great job. Okay, now I'm going to look at this next question. Which pet did the children choose? That word right there. Least. Least. The word least means small, the smallest amount. Which did the children like the least? That means the smallest line. Well, this one was the largest line, so it's not going to be that. So it will be one of these, this line or this line. Which one is the least? Yep, this one right here. So it's not this, it's this one. And that is hamster. We're going to write the word hamster on this line. I'm definitely going to have to look back and to figure out how to spell that. Hamster. Good. All right, friends, you're doing great. Thank you for helping me with this. Get rid of all the extra marks so that we can see clearly. Okay. Now, oh boy. Okay, I'm looking at this question. Let me read this question to you. It says, how many more children like dogs than hamsters? Okay, there's some extra special words in here. I see the word more, but not just the word more. I also see how many more. How many more tells us that we're comparing two things. the rest of the sentence, the rest of the question, it says, how many more children like dogs than hamsters? So that tells us we are comparing. How many more tells us we're comparing. We're comparing dogs and hamsters. So let's figure out how many children like dogs. 8. I'm going to write 8. And I'm going to leave a little space because, you know what, we're going to make a number sentence out of this in a minute here. How many more children like dogs? 8 than hamsters. We have to figure out how many like hamsters. Right here. See that? How many? 5. Okay, so whenever we're comparing two of them and it says how many more, that tells us that we are going to subtract. We are going to subtract because it wants to find the difference. How many more children like dogs than hamsters? So our number sentence looks like that. 8 minus 5 equals, and then we have to figure out the answer. Now there's a couple more, a couple different ways that we can do this. And we've talked about that a little bit when we talked about story problems. And we talked about comparing numbers. How many more children like dogs than hamsters? So we can either, let's do this. Since we already have we already have the graph, I'm going to erase this stuff that we marked on the graph, okay? Because if you think back about when we talked about story problems and we're trying to figure out how many more of something, we would draw a picture and we would compare the two, right? So, and since we're working with the graph, it's kind of like the picture's already drawn for us because each of the squares represents that many children, right? However many children like hamsters and however many children like dogs. So we're not looking at cats right now. I'm going to just cross that off totally. So we're only looking at dogs and hamsters, okay? Whenever it's the same, I'm going to cross off. And you know what? I'm going to switch to a different color to make this a little different so we can see it a little differently. Hamster and a dog. I'm going to cross off one square, which represents one child that likes a hamster, or one child that likes a dog. I'm going to cross off one at a time, okay? But each time I cross off a hamster, I'm going to cross off a dog. Because they have to be the same, because we're comparing them. Okay? I'm going to cross off a hamster and a dog. And I'm going to keep doing that until I run out of one or the other. Making sure that I cross off each one. Okay? When I cross off one, I cross off the other. So I crossed off all hamster. Oh, I can't cross off any more hamsters. There's no more left. There's more dogs left, though, so that tells us that this many more kids like dogs than they do hamsters. How many is that? 3. That tells us that 8 minus 5 equals 3. That tells us that 3 more children like dogs than hamsters. All right, looks like we have one more question to answer. I am going to erase all this stuff that we wrote on there because we need to be able to see our graphing questions. All right, now number 7 says, how many children in all chose cats and dogs? Okay, now these are the important words. How many children in all? In all tells us that we are going to add. What are we going to add? Cats and dogs. Those are the two numbers that we're going to add. And we're going to make a number sentence just like we did with number 6, the question number 6. All right, so we're going to look at cats. How many children like cats? Go down the line right here. 6. So 6 plus, what are we adding next? Dogs. Find the dog line, run your finger down to the end, all the way down, 8. So 6 plus 8 equals, now we have to figure that out. Now, again, if we were doing a story problem, we could draw a picture. Well, we don't have to draw a picture because right here, it's kind of like in the graph, the picture's already drawn for us, so we don't have to do that. All we have to do is count up. We're adding them all together. In all, we're adding together, so that means we just count up all of the dogs and all of the cats. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That means, how many children in all chose cats and dogs? 14. Because 6 and 8 is 14. We put the amount of dogs and the amount of cats together, and that makes 14. Friends, you did a really good job helping me. You're going to do a seesaw activity that's very similar to this. It'll be a different kind of, or a different data in the graph, but you're going to do the same thing. Really think about the graph. Really look at the graph. Use your brain. Really think about what the questions are asking you. If you need help reading them, that's fine. I recorded my voice reading the questions to you. You can play that as many times as you need to. Okay? Do your best. Take your time. I don't want you to try to rush through it. I want you to really be thinking about the graph and the questions. Okay? Because you are going to use your brain and interpret. That's very important. Interpret the data. You're going to ask and answer questions using the graph and your brain. Okay? I know that you can do a good job, and I'm excited to see what you come up with.